All right, Rob, we got a very interesting story here. And you started off the show talking about it. How Major League Baseball was now going to integrate Negro League statistics into their official stats and how that changes some of the all-time leaders. I'll let you kind of mention those names. But I love this, Rob. I love this. This to me is this is like not just paying lip service to Black history or the misdeeds of the past, to put it lightly, against African Americans. This is acknowledging that the Negro Leagues was legitimate, and that like now, and I read the article in USA Today about this, Rob, and Josh Gibson's one of his descendants. I think it might have been, I don't know if it's a grandson or great grandson or what, but he said that now when people think of Josh Gibson, they won't think of him as just a great Negro League player, but they'll think of him as a great player, period. And I don't like the fact, it is what it is. Don't like the fact that he has to kind of, the major leagues has to acknowledge him for him to get his full credit. We should value what he did in the Negro Leagues just for what it is. But that's the society we're in right now, and that's the state of things. And so this is going to raise the stature of Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige and those other great Negro League players who never got a chance. And even though Satchel did play in the major leagues, but a lot who, during their primes,
by the time he got there,
right.
Yeah.
During their primes, they didn't play in the majors or didn't play, period, in the majors. And Rob, we all know Jackie Robinson, who lit the major leagues on fire right from the beginning, was not the best Negro League player.
No, he was the one that they picked. He was handpicked, Chris, because he had grown up in California, and it was just he thought that he would be able to deal with what he had to endure. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah,
Jackie Robinson died early because of the stress that he carried, Chris, for everybody, and what he had to endure, even teammates in the beginning. You know what I mean? Well, a lot of people didn't want him out there. And imagine playing there. It's a miracle, and I say this seriously, that something tragic didn't happen. Like it's a miracle. Is. It really is.
He could have, some harm could have came his way, and you might have even gotten away with it.
Easily,
the way
Chris.
Things went down back then. Yep.
That's what I'm saying, like for real. And even imagine being in the major leagues, you can't even eat in the restaurants. The Dodgers, to their credit, Chris, wouldn't stay at the hotels that wouldn't allow Jackie. They would move. They wouldn't let their team stay there. If he had to eat in the kitchen, a lot of teammates would eat in the kitchen with him. You know what I mean? Not in the main dining room. It was a different world, and I think a lot of people, I get it. But it wasn't a million years ago. That's what I always say that. People who were running stuff and doing stuff. 1947?
Chris,
they're still alive.
70 years ago.
Right. They could still be alive and still be a part of the society. But this was the normal place. But yeah, I mean, Chris, just to say, I was on some of the Zoom calls on this, a part of this review committee, and how to figure out what stats should count, which ones shouldn't count. And I mean, it had, it was a Zoom calls about 20, 25 people, including like CeCe Sabathia was on it, and Claire Smith, the Hall of Fame baseball writer, the only female black baseball writer who's in the Hall of Fame.
With Claire.
You worked with Claire, New
York Times,
much respect for Claire and her coverage of baseball and what even she went through in her career when Dick Williams was the manager of the Padres. Because I don't know if you know this story. Again, this wasn't 100 years ago. And they kicked her out of the clubhouse. And Dick Williams didn't want her in there. And Steve Garvey and some of the other players, Chris, got dressed, came outside to give Claire her interviews when they heard what was going on. Guys like that who just didn't buy into these old school managers and what was going on. But the bottom line is, in this, was trying to figure out what stats they combed through all black newspapers and coverages of these games to figure out, did a guy have 3 home runs, and where'd they get the numbers from, and to try to authenticate the numbers and whatnot. And now you look at a situation, Chris, where Josh Gibson, it used to be the leading hitter in baseball for a long time was Ty Cobb. Now it's Josh Gibson.
373 or 373 batting average. That's incredible.
Slugging percentage, Chris. Another one. On base percentage. I mean, these are big time, big time, long-standing Major League Baseball records and where people fit in, and that they're going to embrace it and not, like you say, Chris, just lip service, or let's just give a check to the 2,300 remaining. I think that's what the number is. Whatever Negro League players, or that's how many were there. I think there's only 3 left. How many? It's not many.
Three players who played in the Negro Leagues are alive today.
I can't remember. I saw that. No, let me see.
Let me ask you this,
Here we go,
Rob.
Chris. Let me just give this to you. So there were more than 2,300 Negro League ball players between 1920 and 1948, including the era's 3 living Negro League players. Yes, Chris, there's only 3, and guess what? One of the all-time greats is Willie Mays, who is going to be down when we go to Birmingham on June 20th. He played in the Negro League down in Birmingham, Alabama, Chris, at Rickwood, which is the oldest stadium in this country's history, baseball stadium. And Willie Mays, he's 93. I hope he can make it down there, for this game against the Cardinals and the Giants. But there are only 3 remaining Negro League players, and Willie Mays is one of them.
Let me ask you this. As I look at these numbers, did the Negro Leagues, did they just play? They played a lot fewer games because, I mean, obviously the majors were playing
154 back then.
Right, 154 games. I look at Josh Gibson's stats, and, I mean, most he ever played in a year, at least according to these numbers on Baseball Reference, was 69 games was the most he played in a year.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there were 50 games. So they did not play nearly as many games as the major leagues.
No, I don't think, because it wasn't. I think that they probably played, Chris, obviously a shorter schedule. It wasn't as established as Major League Baseball with 154 games in the stadiums, and that's why they did barnstorming and they did all-star games against the major leaguers, because they had to be able to do things like that. This is interesting. I wonder, for baseball fans, can you wrap your arms around it that Ty Cobb's isn't the leading hitter in Major League Baseball history anymore? It's Josh Gibson. And do you like this, or do you push back on it and say they didn't play in the major leagues? They played in the Negro Leagues, and they shouldn't mix the numbers together, even though it wasn't their doing. They didn't have an opportunity to play in the big leagues, and I think that's what baseball's looking at, to say these guys were great in their own right, and we know this, Chris. Here's why, to me, it's legitimate. One of the all-time great players is Willie Mays, who played in that league as well. It's not like none of the guys who played in that league, Chris, ever made it in the majors. Then you can make an argument. Satchel Paige was pitching in his 50s in the big leagues. That's another argument to tell you what kind of talent was there.
Jackie Robinson, who, again, wasn't the best player, came into the league and won Rookie of the Year. When did he win his first MVP?
I think it was.
It was pretty early.
Close. Yeah, it was early.
So my point is, he wasn't even the best player in the Negro Leagues, and he came right into the major leagues and played great right away.
Yeah, that was the first year of the Rookie of the Year too, 1947.
Oh, really?
Great? Yeah, and he won it. First year they gave Rookie of the Year, but I think it's those things like that, Chris, that legitimize it to me.
His third year, Rob, his third season,
so it was 50.
MVP.
What year was that?
1949.
49.
And now he didn't enter the majors until he was 28 himself.
Right.
So he was older too. But Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think the fact that you did have players that played in the Negro Leagues come into the majors and play well and be some of the best players in the league. I think the fact that, Rob, when they played against one another.
There you go. That was the second part of it,
The Negro
Chris.
Leagues would win their fair share of games.
It wasn't like they were getting slaughtered like it was Little League against Major League. And they played in a lot of those games, Chris, I was telling you about, like all-star games, like barnstorming where they played.
Oh, yeah, and they held their own and won plenty of the games. And I also think, Rob, the fact that African-American players have been great baseball players. So it's not like they couldn't, like, they're some of the best players that we've ever seen. So to say that the Negro Leagues was not up to par, there's just no reason not to believe that it was up to par.
And let's not forget, Hank Aaron played in the Negro League, Chris. Negro League as well. He played for the Indianapolis Clowns. So he was another player. There's just too many great players who played in that league who wound up going on to star in the major leagues. And I think that's the validity of it all, is that these guys, had they been given the chance, would have been great players longer, you know, and would have had many of opportunities to establish these records. We came in on the late end, on the back end, Chris, and still go look at the record books. Right. It's incredible.
And some people might say, well, it's not fair to the major league players at the time now, Ty Cobb and others, their records won't stand. But I say, well, it was much more fair to them. And what's even happening today is still more fair to them than it was fair to the black players during that time.
Who couldn't play
They
at
got
all.
less money. They obviously didn't get the stardom that they would have gotten. That's generational wealth that they missed out on because because of racism. So I'm fine. I think, and I totally believe this is legitimate, and I am overjoyed about this. I think the one legitimate argument against it, Rob, that I could see if somebody had was that they did play so much fewer games. You probably, because then stamina becomes, and it's easier, obviously, to play 50 games than 150.
Than 154, right.
Yeah. So can you hit 350 over? I mean, we see it all the time in the majors where, first 30, 40 games of the season, maybe even longer.
You can do that, right. You might not be able to
hitting 380.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's the only legitimate thing.
That's fair.
But I still love this, and I'm proud of baseball for this. This is a very good move.
No, this is groundbreaking, Chris.
Yep,
this is absolutely really groundbreaking, and it's not a token gesture. A token gesture is, let's acknowledge them. Let's put their plaques on this wall over here in this room. Let's cut them a check to the 3 living Negro League players.
Bring them out
keep
to
it
throw
moving.
out a pitch or something like that.
Keep it
first
moving.
pitch or whatever. Yep, totally agree.